India, land of colors, culture, and contradictions, behind the vibrant festivals and booming tech hubs lies a hidden world the travel brochures never mention. Deep in rural Rajasthan exists a village where prostitution isn't a crime, it's tradition. Here, daughters are born not to dream, but to inherit a fate. This is NVL Travel Documentary, and today's travel documentary pulls you beyond the tourist lens into one of India's most infamous prostitution villages. Uncover facts about countries that challenge what you think you know. A country documentary where poverty, gender, and survival blur into a haunting reality. Are you ready to reveal the murky secrets no one talks about? Number 1. India's rise and its buried inequality. India. A land of 1,000 festivals and 1,000 languages, quite literally. With an area of over 3 million square kilometers and a population that recently surpassed 1,400,000,000 people, this South Asian giant is home to one of the most diverse and complex societies in the world. More than 20 major languages are officially recognized, and over 1,600 dialects are spoken across 28 states and 8 union territories. Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, Buddhism all coexist within borders drawn by both ancient tradition and colonial legacy. From the snowy peaks of the Himalayas to the sun-drenched coasts of Kerala, from the slums of Mumbai to the space centers launching satellites into orbit, India is a country of paradoxes, and perhaps nowhere else on Earth does tradition and modernity collide with such force. In recent years, India has emerged as one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. In 2024, its gross domestic product reached nearly $4 trillion, making it the 5th largest economy globally. Tech hubs like Bengaluru, often dubbed the Silicon Valley of Asia, are attracting massive foreign investments. Bollywood, the world's largest film industry by volume, continues to shape pop culture across continents. And in the field of space technology, India's Chandrayaan-3 mission successfully landed on the moon's south pole in late 2023, a historic first. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This rising superpower is also home to some of the most persistent and deep-rooted social inequalities on the planet. Beneath the glitter of high-tech campuses and 5-star hotels, millions still live without access to clean water, basic education, or even safety. According to the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index of 2024, over 176 million Indians still live in conditions of severe poverty, the majority of them women and children. That's more people than the entire population of Russia. And the gap keeps growing. The World Inequality Report shows that the top 1% of India's population now holds more than 40% of the country's total wealth, while the bottom 50% share less than 3%. It's not just economic disparity, it's a chasm, a social fault line splitting the nation in two. And for Indian women, that divide is even sharper. While some are rising to become CEOs, scientists, and political leaders, millions more are trapped in a life of silence, stigma, and survival. Nowhere is this more heartbreakingly visible than in India's prostitution villages. Hidden pockets of rural darkness, where sex work is not just tolerated, it's inherited. Take a moment to let that sink in. In these communities, especially in northern states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, girls are born not to be doctors or dreamers, but to become sex workers, just like their mothers and their grandmothers before them. It's a cycle older than many of the country's democratic institutions, and it's still spinning today, largely unchecked. You won't find these places in your India travel documentary. You won't hear their names in tourism campaigns about yoga retreats or spiritual awakenings, but they exist, in the shadows, on the margins, behind the facade of a country on the rise. As one local NGO worker puts it, we celebrate sending rockets to the moon, but ignore the fact that girls in some villages are groomed to sell their bodies before they even reach puberty. So, what does development mean, really, if it leaves millions behind? Can a nation truly rise when half its people are chained to centuries-old systems of exploitation? This is the uncomfortable journey we invite you to take, because until we see the full picture, Both the skyscrapers and the slums, the achievements and the injustices, we are only tourists, not witnesses. Number 2. Villages where prostitution is inherited. When we talk about sex work, we often picture the neon-lit red light districts of urban jungles. But in India, some of the oldest and darkest roots of prostitution grow not in the cities, but in the villages. And what makes this even more disturbing, in many of these places, sex work is not just a means of survival, it's a birthright. Across rural India, an estimated 3 million women are engaged in prostitution. But this isn't just about numbers. Behind each figure is a face, often young, often poor, and more often than not, born into a marginalized caste or tribal community. These are not women who chose this path. This is the only road that was ever paved for them. Let's zoom into one such place, a village in Alwar district, Rajasthan. Alwar is known for its palaces and tiger reserves, but beyond the tourist trails lies a reality most Indians would rather not see. In this particular village, and in others like it across northern India, prostitution is a profession passed down from mother to daughter, generation after generation. Locals will even tell you, this is our tradition, but what kind of tradition sells childhood before it even begins? This is especially true in communities like the Nat and Badia, both of whom have historically been labeled as criminal tribes under British colonial rule, a stigma that still echoes today. For many families in these groups, girls are groomed from a very young age, not for school, not for freedom, but for a life that mirrors their mothers, waiting by the roadside, behind a curtain, or under a dim bulb in a tin-roofed shack. What's even more heartbreaking is the legal gray zone these women live in. You see, in India, prostitution itself is technically not illegal, but just about everything surrounding it, brothel keeping, pimping, soliciting in public, is. So while sex work exists in plain sight, it is surrounded by laws that do nothing to protect the women and everything to expose them to abuse. This lack of protection allows an entire ecosystem of exploitation to thrive. According to a 2024 report by Human Rights Watch, over 70% of rural sex workers are controlled by pimps or trafficking networks. Many of them are trafficked as minors, some as young as 11 years old, under the guise of marriage or employment. Once in, getting out becomes nearly impossible, especially with no legal backing, no education, and no family support. Let's pause here and ask the question that's screaming beneath the surface. If India is racing toward modernity, why are millions of women still trapped in medieval cycles of exploitation? Is the so-called development only for those who can read, write, and own property? What about the girls who never got a first day of school? What about the women who learned how to price their bodies before they could write their names? This is not just a social issue, it's a moral contradiction at the heart of a rising superpower. Now picture this. In villages like those of the Nat and Badia, little girls are sometimes dressed in makeup and jewelry by the time they are 8 years old. Not for a school recital, but as part of being prepared for the trade. There's no euphemism for this, it is grooming. It is generational trafficking wrapped in the language of culture, and it continues in broad daylight. According to the Indian National Crime Records Bureau, reports of human trafficking from rural regions have risen by over 30% in the last 5 years, despite tighter legislation. Why? Because laws mean little when poverty is deeper than the reach of justice. Because in many of these villages, traffickers are not outsiders, they are relatives, neighbors, even respected elders. So where do we go from here? The truth is, you can't fix what you won't face. And India, like many nations, has mastered the art of celebrating its successes while burying its failures. But if we want to understand this country beyond its temples and tech parks, we must be willing to see the India that is hidden behind its own pride. Because behind the veil of tradition, there is a girl waiting, not to be rescued, not even to be loved, just to be seen. Number 3, poverty, culture, and the trap for women. So, how does a girl, born into a quiet village surrounded by wheat fields and temple bells, end up on the path of selling her body before she even finishes childhood? The answer isn't simple, but it always begins in the same place: poverty. In rural India, poverty isn't just a lack of money, it's a lack of options, a lack of voice, a lack of visibility. According to India's latest National Family Health Survey in 2025, more than 45% of rural households still live below the poverty line. That's nearly half of rural India, struggling to meet even basic needs like food, shelter, and clean water. For many women in these areas, they own no land, have no legal income, and no access to stable employment. Seasonal farm work pays little when it's available. Domestic work in nearby towns is unreliable and often exploitative. So when a trafficker offers quick money, or worse, when a family decides the daughter herself is the asset to sell, the trap tightens. And it tightens fast. Now layer on top of that a second crisis, the collapse of education. In 2025, despite government efforts to expand rural schooling, over 70% of women in India's rural areas still lack access to basic education, according to the Ministry of Education's Rural Literacy Index. No reading, no writing, no digital skills, just survival. And without literacy, there's no chance of applying for government aid, seeking legal help, or even understanding that rights exist at all. It's like being blind in a world built for the sighted. But the spiral goes deeper, into the dark corners of debt and desperation. Microloan schemes and informal lenders often prey on poor women, with interest rates soaring as high as 150% per year. Yes, you heard that right, 150. Many women, desperate to pay for a sick child's medicine or a sibling's wedding, take the loan, only to realize they can never repay it. And when money runs out, their body becomes the collateral. They don't choose this, they are pushed into it by a system that offers them nothing else. Still, even in that pit, there's another weight pulling them down: culture. Traditional norms in many parts of India dictate that a woman's role is to serve her family, her husband, her community. So when her family is drowning in poverty, society expects her to sacrifice, even if that sacrifice means selling her dignity. Even if it means never being allowed to dream. Some mothers are told they are honorable for sending their daughters into sex work because it feeds the rest of the family. That's not just wrong, that's twisted. And if you think opportunities are spread evenly across the country, think again. The urban-rural divide in India remains staggering. According to the India Labour and Employment Report 2025, urban women are 5 times more likely to find formal employment than their rural counterparts. 5 times. That's not a gap, that's a chasm. Unemployment among rural women, especially in northern India, has reached an all-time high, hovering above 30%. These women are not lazy, they're invisible. So let's recap. No land, no job, no education, crippling debt, a culture that tells you to obey, a system that looks the other way. What choice is really left? This isn't just about a few villages. It's a national failure, a moral blind spot. And yet somehow these women endure. They survive floods, famines, fists, and fear. But survival should never be mistaken for freedom. In the next part of our journey, we'll uncover what this life actually looks like from the inside, the psychological toll, the daily danger, and the invisible scars left behind by years of exploitation. Because behind every statistic is a woman, and she has a story. Number 4. After prostitution, the struggle to belong. When a woman escapes the sex trade, most people assume the worst is behind her. But what if I told you, sometimes the hardest part begins after she leaves? For thousands of women across rural India, exiting prostitution is not the end of suffering. It's simply a new chapter in silence, filled with judgment, fear, and isolation. And the numbers say it all. According to a 2024 report by the International Labour Organization and Human Rights Watch, more than 80% of women who leave prostitution in India face social rejection. That's right, 8 out of 10 are shunned by their communities. Neighbors turn away, employers shut their doors, even family members sever ties. It's like society wants them to disappear, not just from the brothel, but from memory. Now ask yourself, How can someone rebuild their life when the very society that failed to protect them now refuses to accept them? It doesn't stop there. One of the most glaring failures lies in the lack of support systems. As of early 2025, India has only a few dozen government-funded shelters specifically designated for women exiting prostitution, and most are located in urban areas, far from where the need is greatest. In rural states like Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan, many survivors have to travel hundreds of kilometers just to find a safe bed for the night. Mental health support? Nearly non-existent. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, less than 20% of rescued sex workers receive any form of psychological counseling. But how do you heal a wound you're not even allowed to talk about? And what about skills training? The idea that survivors can start over with vocational education is a noble one, but reality tells a different story. With limited funding, long waiting lists, and deep-rooted stigma from employers, very few women ever get the chance to earn a dignified living. So even those who escape often end up right back where they started. Then there's the fear, a constant, choking fear. Many of these women live under the threat of retaliation from pimps, brothel owners, or trafficking rings. And let's not forget, 75% of sex workers in rural India are under the control of organized crime networks, based on the latest data from UNODC. These are not just individual abusers, they're systems, armed with money, muscle, and corruption. Some survivors have reported being followed, threatened, or physically attacked after trying to leave. Others say their children were targeted, coerced, kidnapped, or groomed into the very trade they tried to escape. Imagine spending years in bondage, finally breaking free only to look over your shoulder every single day. This cycle doesn't just steal freedom, it destroys hope. And that's the cruel irony. For a country pushing into space, developing smart cities, and celebrating female CEOs, millions of women still remain voiceless in the shadows, punished not for committing a crime, but for being victims of one. We love success stories. But what about the stories that never get to succeed? The ones of women who stay silent, not because they want to, but because speaking out might cost them everything. The ones who don't escape, not because they don't dream, but because they know society will shut the door in their face the moment they walk out. So here's the real question. Is freedom really freedom if there's no safety waiting on the other side? Number 5. Resisting the cycle, rebuilding lives. After walking through so much darkness, poverty, exploitation, fear, it's natural to ask, is there hope? And the answer is yes. But it's complicated. Escaping the world of sex trafficking is not a door you simply walk through, it's a climb, one steeped in stigma, systemic barriers, and emotional wounds that don't heal overnight. But across India, a quiet revolution is underway, led by survivors, social workers, lawyers, and changemakers who believe that every woman deserves a second chance. Let's start with the grassroots warriors, the NGOs on the front lines. Organizations like Apni-Aap, Prerana, and Guriya have been doing the work most won't even talk about. They go where others won't, into red light districts, rural prostitution villages, train stations where girls are trafficked under the radar. Their work ranges from rescue operations and legal advocacy to education and psychological counseling. Take Guriya, for example. Founded in Varanasi, this NGO has rescued more than 1,500 women and children from trafficking rings since its inception. But rescue is just the beginning. The harder part is helping these women rebuild their lives and preventing their daughters from falling into the same trap. On the policy side, there's the Ujjwala scheme, launched by the government of India. The name means light, and that's exactly what the program aims to bring. Ujjwala provides temporary shelter, vocational training, medical care, and legal support for women exiting prostitution. According to the Ministry of Women and Child Development, by the end of 2024, over 100 shelters across India were operational under this scheme, serving thousands of women each year. But here's the reality check, it's still not enough. Because while help exists at the individual level, the broader community and system often remains stuck in the past. Let's break that down. At the individual level, survivors need trauma-informed therapy, legal identity documents, access to bank accounts, and training for real, sustainable employment. And that's exactly where education and microfinance play a key role. NGOs like APNIOP now run community schools for at-risk girls, while micro-lending groups are offering small, interest-free loans to help women open tailoring shops, food stalls, or even go back to school. But individual transformation means little without community support. That's the second level, and perhaps the most fragile. In many areas, societal attitudes have barely shifted. Survivors are still labeled as dirty, impure, or dangerous. And that mindset can undo years of rehabilitation in seconds. That's why organizations are now hosting community dialogues, using theater, storytelling, and village councils to shift the narrative, to remind people that these women are not criminals. They are survivors. They are mothers, daughters, humans. And finally, at the system level, the biggest obstacles remain: limited funding, low conviction rates for traffickers, and weak enforcement of laws. According to a 2024 report by Human Rights Watch, less than 5% of arrested traffickers in rural India are ever convicted. 5%. That means for every one trafficker sent to prison, 19 walk free, often returning to the same villages to recruit new victims. Why? Because corruption still clouds the system, because survivors fear retaliation, and because many police officers still view these women as offenders instead of victims. So what does that tell us? It tells us that saving one girl is heroic, but saving a generation, that takes a movement that educates, empowers, and enforces, one that meets women where they are and walks with them, step by step, until they no longer need saving. Because freedom isn't just the absence of chains, it's the presence of opportunity, dignity, and choice. And while the road is long, every small effort, every rescue, every classroom, every court case won brings India one step closer to a future where no girl is born to be bought. India is breathtaking, no one can deny that. From the grandeur of the Taj Mahal to the chaos of Chandni Chowk, the country offers color, culture, and contrast in every frame. But behind the postcard beauty lies another India, one that doesn't make it into tourist brochures. An India where millions of women are forgotten, their lives shaped by poverty, stigma, and silence, where tradition and injustice blur, and where being born female can still mean being born into a fate you never chose. Each region tells a different story, each village holds a different truth, and the deeper we look, the more we realize no nation is ever just what it shows on the surface. That's why responsible travel matters. It's not just about where you go, but how deeply you're willing to understand the people behind the places. Because empathy is the first step to real change. As we close this journey, remember, just because we don't see a problem doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Sometimes, the most painful truths are hidden behind the curtain of silence. If this story moved you, even just a little, consider sharing it. Leave a comment, tell us what surprised you, and if you'd like to keep exploring the unseen corners of the world with us, feel free to subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary, because the more we see, the more we understand, and the more we understand, the harder it becomes to look away.